Trying to wow your customers, employees, patients, students, or really anybody else you're designing for doesn't do much good if you don't deliver on the basics. In fact, by trying to wow them and leaving out the basics, you might just create a lot of resentment. When our attention is focused on going big, those we want to engage with can end up just going home because we miss everyday moments to make a great impression. This is precisely what the Unwow, your blueprint for experience designs of all kinds, is meant to help you with. Finding those regular opportunities to design small for big impacts. We might not always be able to wow our audiences, but we can always unwow them by focusing on the things that can matter the most. Follow me, Gary David, on LinkedIn, or subscribe at theunwow.com to stay on top of all of the Unwow news and learn how to design better everyday experiences, as well as become part of the Unwow author community. So that's theunwow.com. Provide your email to stay on top of all the Unwow news and learn how to do better everyday experience with regular reliability and impeccable consistency. Now, on to the show.
1, 2, 3.
Hi, I'm Gary David. Welcome to Experience by Design, the podcast where we explore experience designs of all kinds. Hello, experience designers and EXDers everywhere. Hope you are doing well. This past weekend, I had the distinct displeasure of participating in an event called the Money Dash, put on by a company called Event Lab. Now, I used to put on bike race events, did that for over a decade, and I know a little bit about race promotion. I also have participated in, I don't even know how many athletic events. It's been a lot since over my quote unquote athletic career. And without a doubt, the Muddy Dash was by far the absolute worst experience in almost every way from an event planning standpoint. There's too many things to enumerate here about how bad it was, but just a brief list. Way too many participants for the venue, resulting in standstill traffic on single-lane roads, by the way, that went through a neighborhood, for over an hour. Not enough staff to process the participants. An unimaginative course with few built obstacles. No signage for wayfinding to figure out where you're supposed to go sign in. The quote-unquote epic party at the end was just some guy in a tent playing music. Props to him for trying to keep it together. He was dealing with a lot of obstacles at the time, more obstacles actually than we had on the course. The whole affair was pretty chaotic and sad, well under what was marketed on the website. And this wasn't a one-off situation either. If you go online and look at reviews for Muddy Dash, you'll find many of the same comments. Regardless of the location around the United States, it seems that the experience is just as bad. I have to say, it takes real commitment to continuously go that far beyond or below expectations and seemingly do nothing to fix it. I mean, you see the reviews, you see what's going on, you think you might fix it. Nope, not going to fix it. We're going to commit to being terrible. On the other hand, it was a great example of what happens when you get the unwow wrong. And as I stood there in line for a really long time, I was thinking, this is going to make really good content for the podcast. Another positive, if there was any positives from the day, was the way in which the participants created a wonderful vibe despite these other shortcomings. It was especially great how you had people of different body types, ages, athletic abilities, costumes, etc., all creating this kind of community of the moment, laughing and joking with one another, getting dirty, and hopefully was kind of clean mud, and just having fun together. We were all there to have fun through physical activity. There was no timer, no results, no one seemed to care about their speed. People were just enjoying the moment together. We just wanted to be active in a different kind of way than just going to the gym or going out for a run. It just underlines how amazing it is when people come together to exercise and how this act of coming together, of connection and belonging, can overcome the greatest attempts to sabotage the experience. On that note, my guest today knows a lot about exercise and physical fitness. Justin Roethlingshoefer grew up in Canada playing hockey, as I guess one does. His focus on fitness then extended to his college major in exercise science and a master's in exercise physiology. From there, he worked with teams such as the Washington Capitals, Anaheim Ducks, and even the National Hockey League as a performance coach. Today, he is a director of performance for the Hockey Summit and the founder of Own It, a health system for high-performing leaders. He is also the author and founder of Holy Health, which is his effort to bridge, quote, scripture and science, helping individuals, pastors, and churches restore health of body, mind, and spirit. And I should mention his book, Holy Health, is coming out on August 11th. We talk about his early interest in physical fitness and transformation, leading to his current focus today. Justin talks about the need to take a more holistic approach to health that incorporates the spiritual and the physical. While there is a growing interest in health and wellness, these messages leave out an emphasis on optimizing the body in order to live one's calling. It's not just about results in the individual, it's about greater results for all of us connecting together through our purpose. Justin also talks about the importance of identity transformation, breaking generational patterns of alcoholism, abuse, poverty, and privilege to embrace the potential of a different life. While that transformation might start with the body, it has to include the spirit as well. We also talk about the Canadian band, The Tragically Hip, which I have been doing a deep dive into, and the importance of coming together, whether that be around watching the band on its final tour, which we talk about in relation to the hip, to embrace exercise, to create this kind of mutual accountability and celebration of health, or to live a spiritually inspired life. And as we discuss, there's nothing wrong with combining all of these at the same time. It was a really fascinating conversation about health experiences, spiritual experiences, and how we can bridge the spiritual and the body to create greater transformation. Hope you enjoy it. I don't want to start out too stereotypically, but I'm going to, because I just said I don't want to start that way. You're Canadian.
I am.
And I just got done watching long time running the Tragically Hip documentary.
Yeah.
And rewatching it. I've seen it before and I was rewatching it. And then I didn't realize that there was a 4-part series on Amazon Prime called No Dress Rehearsal. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I haven't seen it, no.
And so I kind of wanted to start there for no other reason that I don't get a chance to talk with many people who might be familiar with Tragically Hip, who I've seen in concert here in Boston. But did you watch their final concert on their Man Machine Poem Tour that happened in Kingston? Because they showed it in the documentary on CBC and like everybody in Canada was watching it. Do you recall that at all?
I do recall that, yes.
Were you watching it?
Yes.
What was that like? That must have been just unbelievable.
I think the thing that people forget about the Tragically Hip is where the United States has Michael Jackson, or it has the Beatles, or it has like whoever it is. Like they've got these big iconic musicians, and I actually had somebody over at our house talking about it this morning. Okay. We were talking about this exact thing where there's very few people who will ever experience what like true fame is. And if you were to go through and list the top 10 most quote unquote famous people in the last 100 years, I guarantee you 7 or 8 of those people would be musicians. They'd probably be Elvis on there. There'd probably be Michael Jackson on there. You might have the Beatles. You might have Sinatra. People of that stature. Taylor Swift is probably getting close to that list.
Right.
Like, you probably have those types of people on the list. But for Canada, Tragically Hip is as close as like that is. And that for Canada was like this is who this is, and we vault them, we support them, we cheer for them, and they're not just a band, they're Canada's band. And that is, I think, why that was such a big moment for Canada, and just uniting of a country, and a big celebration for what they had done, and the platform that they had built, and what they were able to celebrate.
Another like weird question based off of that, but why do you think that a band like Tragically Hip has more of that than, let's say, Rush, or let's say some of like the Guess Who, or some of these, or, you know, Our Lady Peace, or whomever? Why did Tragically Hip occupy that space more than Gordon Lightfoot or some of these other groups? Or maybe Gordon was in that same category because he's also a Gord, like Gord Downie.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. And again, I think sometimes people are looking for somebody or a group of people that have just come at it from a different angle. You could be saying the same message, you could be singing the same song, you could be having the same sound, but because you've come from a different place, I think it carries a bigger weight. And I think today you would say, like, Ed Sheeran. I think Ed Sheeran is a magical voice. A magical voice. He's incredibly gifted, incredibly talented. But I think but you go down Broadway in Nashville and you listen to anybody playing acoustic sets in all the bars and restaurants down there, you can find so many gifted people. Go watch The Voice. Go watch American Idol. So many gifted people who can play the guitar and can play a looper and can create music and write music. But the fact that he had a unique story from a unique place that was uncommon and unfamiliar to so many, there's an attraction to that, because even though he became uber famous, he came from a place where he felt unseen, he felt unloved, he felt uncherished, he felt abandoned, he felt alone, which is, I think, where a lot of people can start to relate and go, man, even though he's at the place he is, I can still relate to him in a way that maybe I can't somebody else.
Yeah, and I think there's something about the fact that these are like, you know, four guys from high school, literally, who are all met in the same class together. And it's like this high school band that made it big, especially in Canada and Europe, and still didn't fall into this pretentiousness of fame. Yeah. That made them even more real, and, you know, not again to be stereotypical, but even more Canadian, that they didn't fall into this nonsense.
And I think you nailed it. Like they didn't meet as they were on tour in different places and slowly start to create and have individuals that had different fame and then create a cool band. They were a high school band that started in a garage that suddenly went and did what every other high school band that started in a garage wants to do. Right. And there's something cool about that.
Yeah, I watched that documentary again. I started watching the 4-part miniseries. Then I started like a deep dive into re-listening to their music. And I don't know, maybe it's because like where I'm at in my life right now, but the thing started resonating differently than I did before, because I grew up in Detroit, so we are Canadian adjacent. We heard things on CKLW or on CBC, so I was familiar, but it didn't hit as much as it did right now. And I've just been on this really deep, Tragically Hip dive into their music and their catalog and their story.
Yeah, I love it. So speaking of like just a random fact. Yeah. Did you know that 27% of the Canadian population lives below Seattle?
I did not know that.
Isn't that wild?
It is wild.
I just thought that was incredible. Like when I saw that stat and I was like, no, that can't be true. Like, how is that even possible? But then you draw a straight line all the way across, and there's such a great landmass that lives in southern Ontario that dips down through the Greater Lakes into the depths of Michigan and Ohio and some of those Midwestern states. And it's so densely populated in through that of Windsor and other bordering cities that all that landmass lives much further below the U.S. border than Seattle. And so if you drew a line straight across, you're actually that in like Northern California.
I fancy myself to have more Canadian knowledge than most Americans, given where I grew up. And I do know that Point Pelee is the southernmost point in Canada.
That is true. Yes.
See, boom. So Windsor is the Key West of Canada.
That's a great analogy and great example. Although I will tell you, Key West is a little bit warmer than it is in Point Pelee and Windsor, Ontario.
Well, the other thing I was doing research on you. I was noticing that one of your books was you had a endorsement from Ben Greenfield. And I was like, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time, because I used to listen to his podcast religiously when I was training for endurance events like Ironman and other things like that. And he was like the guy around fat adaptation, about optimization, about eating good fats. And this is before all of this stuff started to become, I would say, now more in vogue.
Sure.
I feel like, Ben, you could tell me more, given your background, was more of a precursor to that kind of message about good fats and fat optimization for endurance events.
Yeah, so Ben actually grew up as a strength coach. That's where he kind of cut his teeth at, I believe it was the University of Wyoming. I could be wrong. But cut his teeth as a strength coach. And obviously that's where I cut my teeth too. And so that's really where we bonded and created friendship, really understanding that this health thing was much more holistic, was much more dynamic than just a, do you squat or do you deadlift? Do you eat chicken or do you eat an egg? And there's so much more to this. It's so much more convoluted. There's so much more integration with the circadian rhythms and the sun rising, the sun setting, the air we breathe, how we walk. Are we indoors? Are we outdoors? Are we sitting? Are we standing? Are we eating for fuel? Are we eating for survival? Like, there were so many other things that came around to our philosophies. And I think that was the beauty of where our relationship really kicked off. And I've loved that man for a long time. Since 2016, maybe. So about 11 years, we've had a relationship, and, it's just been so cool to see how the different in thought and the different of opinion has been able to come together. And even though we started theoretically far away and have kind of come to the middle and can join in a place and continue to go far away, it still always comes back to that same intersection point, which is that I think oftentimes as human beings, we seek to major in the minors. Meaning, let's try to spend as much money as we can on the sexy things while forgetting about the biggest things that theoretically sometimes are even free. They can have the biggest impact on our health.
I really appreciate that, because the new and the quote unquote sexy tends to draw up the oxygen in the room, right? The next new thing, rather than the basics. And I've been kind of delving into that myself. It's like, are you taking care of the basics before, I was talking to my daughter who's 16 going on, 23. Yeah. And she was, wants to get like organizing systems for her bedroom. I'm like, why don't you pick up the trash that's on before we kind of go big and like, we need to have an organizing system. Why don't you just pick your room up first? Yeah. What are the basics that you're overlooking, that if you attend to them, you're actually going to see a lot more impact than going after those sexy new things?
Yep. 100%. 100%. I like to call it like the amplifier. It would be like if, I give the example of the car all the time. If all of a sudden, you put brand new rims on your car, you get the windows tinted out, you get the cool lights that go on the dash that kind of light up, you've got the undercarriage lights, you've got the brand new foot mats so that they match and they're color detailed. And now you're ready to go out with your friends. Are like, hey guys, look how sick this is. But then the car's got no gas in it. It's like, well,
right.
Cool. But we're going to actually take Johnny's clunker over in the corner that's fully gassed up and fully oil changed and ready to go. And she's running, because that's actually going to take us from A to B.
Yep. Going to your journey into health, going back even your hockey career. And the first question is, did your parents wish you chose a different position than goalie, given how much equipment costs all the time?
Yes. I will say this is, I still remember the day that I chose to play goal. And this probably says something about the inner healing journey that I had to go on, and control and perfectionism. But I was 9 years old and had just played in a tournament. I was a very skilled forward. I'm probably more skilled than I was at goaltending, even at my peak, and probably could have even gone further and created a career of some type, just because of the character and the tenacity that I carry and the work ethic, because I would have figured out a way to make it go as a smaller guy. But we were in a tournament. It was called the Tournament of Nations. It was like one of the biggest tournaments in Canada, like Silver Stick. And this is 1998. And we're in the final. We're in the final of the game. My friend, his name was Ben Walker to be exact. And he and I just fed off each other all game long. And I think I had 6 goals and 5 assists. He had 5 goals and 6 assists. So it was either Ben from Justin or Justin from Ben. And we lost 12-11. And at the end of the game, I walked off and I said to my parents, I said, we just needed one save. And I said, I can do everything possible, but I can't stop the puck. And I said, actually, I probably could. I'm not playing out anymore. I'm going to be a goalie. And that was kind of like what started everything. And I've just always loved the pressure. I've always loved the fact that you see everything happen. You see things from the back. You see things form. You have to be thinking in advance. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm a little bit of a weird odd duck, so I fit in well there too.
Yeah, it's kind of like American football or even Canadian football, the kicker. It's like, just don't talk to the kicker.
Exactly.
Don't coach them. Don't talk to them. Just let that person be alone. Let them deal with it. They're their own kind of breed.
Yep, exactly.
And so the idea of being a goalie and being high pressure, I mean, what is the attraction? Because it's a team sport, but so often it can come down to if you're under their microscope or magnifying glass in ways that other people aren't. It seems like a lot for a 9-year-old to kind of sign up for.
Yeah, there's probably some underlying things that I had to work through, but I think, to be honest with you, if I go back to it, I just loved the process of learning a craft. What a butterfly was, how to get on your angle. One of my favorite teenage growing up memories was in the off season. I absolutely loved getting coached. I loved going to my goaltending clinics. I loved going to power skating once a week. I loved going to my shot stopping clinics twice a week I was coaching with a guy, his name was John Stevenson, goalie coach for the Edmonton Oilers. And we would have 7-8 shooters out there, 4 or 5 goalies. We'd be cycling through. We'd be working on things very specific. And there was nothing like being able to watch a puck off the stick into the glove or into the body, or read a play off a backdoor pass that you can come across and get a one tip and it hits you in the belly because you're just in position. And I loved that process. I loved the thinking component to it. I loved the anticipation. Where's the puck going? But it's also a read and react because you can't cheat off of it. And so I loved learning. I loved experiencing it. And when you get in the zone, you're always on the ice. You're always looking forward. It's a weird position because if you asked me what our team's breakout was, I couldn't tell you. If you asked what the power play was, I couldn't tell you. The penalty kill, I couldn't tell you. My job was to stop the puck. That's it. And that was what I focused on the most. And just that process of how do I get better at this one thing? And how do I learn the art of this one thing, I think is just so cool.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever been a book written about it, but I've become very interested in the power of self-forgiveness in people in those kinds of places, especially in sports, whether it be the goalie, the kicker, the closer in a baseball game.
Yeah.
where that if you give up a home run, you let in a shot, you miss a field goal. You think about the Buffalo Bills teams in the Super Bowl where, they lost on field goals. The power of self-forgiveness to not forget about it, but in some ways forget about it and be able to move on, that's a moment that doesn't define my life or doesn't define who I am. It's just a single point in time. And I don't know if, as a goalie, if there's even that mental part of the game that people in sports who have that particular role, if they're coached on that or if they're given additional support for that.
So I don't think it's at the level that it needs to be, but that was one of the big things that I think, looking back on it and reflecting on it now, helped propel me into even the passion and love of coaching that I have today, because it wasn't just a tactical get from A to B. It was very much a mental, okay, you let in 3 of your first 4 shots. How do you not let in any of your next 32? And how do you, how do you let a bad goal go and focus on the next one? There's a great book out there, Golf as the Game of Life, and then Tennis as the Game of Life, really talking about, again, how you can have a bad shot in golf, but that doesn't ruin a round. Multiple shots that are poor do.
Right.
Same thing in tennis. I think this is the wildest thing. Did you know that so Roger Federer, Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, some of the best players to ever play the game, Rafael Nadal, do you know what percentage of points they won over the course of their career?
No.
52.2%.
Huh.
So that means the best players in the world, like Hall of Fame, like number 1 ranked for, if you took those 4 players, probably number 1 ranked over the course of the last 35 years in those, a combination of each. They won 2.5% more than 50. And that's what makes them the best. That's what makes them the absolute best. And it's such a minuscule amount. And so it's not how skilled you are, how technically sound you are, it's how mentally tough you are to be able to bounce back and not make that error. Or once you make that error, be able to go and make the next point, rally back. And you see this in the strongest of performers, whether that be a kicker who hit the upright from 20 yards out and now all of a sudden has to hit a 50-yarder to win the game, drains it right down the middle. Or a goaltender. You saw it in the playoffs this year in the NHL. You have, and I think this is just a cool story, is Brandon Bussey. Brandon Bussey has been a minor league, I don't even know what you would call him, a journeyman, if you will.
Right.
And suddenly finds himself in the National Hockey League, has a great run, an amazing run in the regular season, one of the highest save percentage with the lowest goals against average. And he gets put into the playoffs in game 4, I believe, maybe game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals. His first start in the playoffs in the NHL is in the Stanley Cup Finals, game 2 or 3. And he hasn't started a game in 57 days. It's almost 2 months. He hasn't seen game action. And all of a sudden he steps into one of the biggest stages in hockey, and he lets in his first 2 shots he faces. Well, lo and behold, he proceeds to let in no more goals the rest of that game, and they win the game 4-2. Fast forward into game 4, game 5, and ultimately game 6, they win the Stanley Cup. And I think it comes back to the testament of what you were saying is there's so much of the game that is mental, not just of a sport, but in life, that we have to realize that mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, we are mental, physical, spiritual, emotional beings. So everything is integrated, and you can't only treat them in silos. You have to treat them as a whole unit. And when you treat them as a whole unit, that's when all of a sudden you can see some progress. That's all of a sudden when you can see some breakthrough. That's all of a sudden when you can see some acceleration and momentum in the degree and the range in which you're actually wanting to go. And that's when everybody starts to get really excited.
It reminds me a little bit of, in sociology, there's something called social determinants of health. And it's this notion that so much of our healthcare outcomes are not just predicated on our biology or, the things we eat, but it's the social systems that we live in, right? And those things can have a huge impact. And then to have better healthcare outcomes, we can't just address the person. We have to address the context. We have to address everything together.
Yep. 100%. And I think oftentimes you even talk about your environment. This is where I can't help but go back to scripture, is humans were created on the sixth day. And I don't think it's by accident that God created man on the sixth day and he didn't create him on the first day, because what has to happen is the perfect environment had to be created. Light and darkness had to be created. The animals had to be created. The plants, the land, the water, the cycle of seasons, everything needed to be created, the atmosphere, so that a human being could thrive. And it said when Adam was placed and Eve was built and they were placed in the garden, that it was harmony. They were playing in harmony with everything in which was created. And their only role was that of to tend to it, to keep it well, to keep it able, to keep it growing, to keep it flourishing, that they were to live in true harmony. And I think that picture is so beautiful in terms of what you just spoke about, because oftentimes we see our environment as an afterthought rather than a forethought as to how do we create an environment that we can thrive so that we can do exactly what it is that we were called to do at the level in which we were called to do it.
One of the things I think is really important about that I always try to keep in mind, which I think fits in, you can tell me if it does or not, is the first environment I have to create is an environment that I can control, which is me, right? I mean, I can't control so much of what goes on outside of me. I can control me and what I do. So let it begin with me and let me first start putting this house in order, this environment in order, before I start worrying about these other things, which, going back to the basics, I might not be able to control at all. It's a lot harder lift, think of controlling those external things than it is to control what I do.
Even as you talk, there's something that comes up in me, and just even simply to explore is, I think we even have to come back to that word control, because we think we have control about even things that are in our control, but even are those things that we think we can control that are in our control actually controllable? Right. And that's a dichotomy all in of itself and a brain twister. But I don't think it's as much about control as I think it is about the word intention. If we have the intention to move in such a way, or the intention to do such a thing, and it doesn't go the way that it was supposed to, that's okay. But we made the effort to be there. For example, we've built this. I think our backyard is the great example of this, right? We live down here in Miami. We moved into this place. It was... We walked onto this property and we just fell in love. It's like, my gosh, it's an acre and a half in the middle of the jungle. There's trees everywhere. There's toucans and parrots and lizards galore that live on this thing. But this property needs a ton of work. It's like we can't even use half of it. And my wife and I had this vision of creating this health haven, this place that was peaceful, quiet, calming. And so what we did was we put in very intentionally this sound system that allows sound to meet you wherever you are on the property, that literally can be calming. We set up lights very intentionally so that they were certain ambient number, so it's not blasting light into your eyes at night when it's supposed to be calming you down, but actually they're still and they're quiet. There's indoor and outdoor gym setup. So if it's hot, you can have everything open. If it's raining, you can have everything closed. There's a ton of green space, so we have access to just being outside in nature, getting our feet on the ground. There's a big barbecue and sitting area where we can have communal time. And so I say all of this is that we intentionally set it up so that we could use it in a very specific way, even though the way that we intend to use it every day that should be within our control may or may not function that way, but we are still in the environment that was so intentionally created that we still get the byproduct of feeling peaceful, calm, situated, and grounded in the space that we are. And so it's not so much about trying to control where we go, but having the intention of why we do it and how we do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification, because I think intent, is a crucial element, right? And speaking of your intent, when did you first find yourselves? I know you've written 6 books. Holy Health is the 6th book, I believe.
Yes.
When did you find yourself being called to write Holy Health in the way that it's written?
Yeah. So when I was writing my previous book, which was The Power of Ownership,
right?
That I was bringing in a lot of scriptural concepts, but never fully boldly taking a stance for where it came from and what it was really all about. And it created this, don't want to say confusion, but as you would read it, it didn't hit like it was supposed to. It didn't land.
Right.
And I'll never forget John Gordon, 20-time best-selling author, leadership guru, an amazing man, made big platform on positivity, positive leadership. How do we do this in the workplace as well as at home? And I gave it to John, and John read it, and he goes, "You need to eliminate all scripture out of here." And I was like, why? Because it's like a fundamental component to who I am. Like, I love it. He goes, because you're going to take all of it out and you're going to put it into your next book, and the next book is going to change the world. And that was really the first time that I had really ever acknowledged and understood the depth and magnitude of what being bold and standing on something that is so true can actually be. And as I walked that, I just started to see like fresh revelation every single day on this alignment of science and scripture. When you take a look at heart rate variability and the way in which our body's put together, the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, all the nerves, the way in which the vagus nerve integrates with the rest of the body, the way that VO2 max is able to increase or decrease oxygenation of the cells, the way the cell is created and what it needs in order to function, oxygen, detoxification, nutrients. You've started to look at all the science that's coming out, especially in the new biohacking phase and craze that this world is in. The moment that I started to look at all that and take 15, 20 years of expertise in that space and just pause and read nothing but scripture, all I started to see was these alignments and these things that stood in agreement with how we were so uniquely created. And when we ultimately start to live back in alignment with how we were created, the body has no option other than to heal. And so this is where the statement comes from, if you heal the cell, the body will heal itself, comes from, is that we were created to heal, created to thrive, but we have to live in alignment with that design. And the science would agree to that, is that, hey, we have 30 trillion cells that are operating inside you, me, and everybody listening at any point of time. Of those 30 trillion cells, 500 million become brand new every 84 days. So that means that every 5 to 7 years, whether we're 45, 55, 95, or 105, you, me, and everybody listening become a completely brand new cellular human being. So this is how we were created and designed to live. But our responsibility as humans, just as Adam and Eve's was to tend to the garden, ours is... Our assignment is to tend to the garden, which is ourselves. How do we create the cellular environment that our cells can function, and the new cells that are ultimately regenerating, restoring, renewing every 84 days are coming into an environment that allows them to thrive, not decay. And when we do that, there's this compounding effect of growth, of healing, of seeing the miraculous happen, simply because we're the walking miracle that we get to look at every single day.
Yeah, we were chatting before we were recording about, there's not many books that combine VO2 max and scripture, which is great. I start to think about Sermon on the Mount, something like, blessed are those who take advantage of their rest days for the gain shall be theirs. It's like this, the integration of these two things together. And I've written, I've read Phil Maffetone, I've read Jack Daniels, I've read a lot of these things, right? I've looked at Lydiard, and it's always the body apart, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of great information and training advice, especially for endurance athletes, the body apart from, in some ways, the self. It's almost like a separate kind of entity, not necessarily integrated. And it's been a while since I've read that stuff, so I don't want to give it short shrift or say anything, that's not true, but it's not as integrated as this read to me.
No, but I think you're bringing up such an amazing point, is because it's not just the science books that make it siloed and leave it out, but so does the church. It's like the body's just a thing that we're living in. And so it's okay to live in sin and ignore the greatest thing that's ever been done, because what's the last thing that a preacher or a pastor usually talks on? Gluttony. What's the last thing a pastor or a preacher usually talks on? Physical discipline. What's the last thing a preacher or somebody gives a sermon on? Is how do we sleep well? Because we'll never talk about these things because they're unpopular to talk about, because the way that we celebrate anything in these places is with sugary foods, is with potluck dinners.
That's what coffee hours for after Mass.
Exactly. And so you think about all of this, is not only do the science books show this as, oh, your body is just this, it's this science experiment to master.
Right.
Whereas faith has told us that, oh, it's just this temporary body we live in to ignore. And we go back and forth between these two dichotomies and never realize that, man, no, these things were always meant to live in alignment. They were always meant to live at the intersection point of one another, where one starts, the other begins, where the other starts, the other begins. It's like it's the two ends of the same thread that we've completely misaligned, which is why we've had such a hard time finding wholeness and true health and this thriving vitality that seemingly feels obscure and out of our reach, no matter what we try and no matter how much effort we put in.
It reminds me a little bit. I went to the Catholic school, so I've been around that, and I was the vestry for an Episcopal church, so I've been around that. And it reminds me of this notion of physician heal thyself, where it's like, religious leader heal thyself. I mean, the amount of energy it can take, I would imagine, to be a spiritual leader, right? That if you aren't in an optimal state of fitness in some ways, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's got to be even more draining, because so many people rely on you for guidance and assistance, that if you can't be there for you in a physical optimal state. So I say all that to say, it's amazing to me that no one's really tried to integrate this before, because how else would you do the work optimally if you weren't taking care of the body?
I think that message and that notion is catching a little bit more mainstream, and it's catching fire a little bit more now. I think it's still leaning too far to the sexy side, because the sexy side can be monetized. Whereas the understanding side tends to be ignored and pushed to the side. And so I love your understanding of it. And you're like, man, nobody's ever really brought this all together in this way before, because it is a fresh message. I think it is a fresh wind that people are being exposed to and catching. And there is my goal whenever I speak anywhere, or whenever I'm locking arms with people, is I don't want them to say, oh, Justin's right. I want them to say, oh, that feels right. Yeah. Because your soul knows the truth. Whether I was to sit here and tell you a lie, or you were to stand up in front of your classroom and tell them a lie, or tell them something that was wrong, they'd sit there and go, it doesn't make sense. Like something doesn't land quite right. But the moment that you say something that is so true, that is rooted biblically, that is rooted factually, that is rooted scientifically, it hits, because your soul goes, that's right. That's right. It's not that I need to be right. It's that the message is right. The tonality is right. What's coming alongside is right. Because you said it. Heal thyself. Like your body was created to heal. Like there's no other way to explain cancer disappearing from a person's body. There's no other way to explain diabetes magically disappearing. There's no way to explain a pancreas magically turning back on, or a bone going from fractured to whole again. Like, this is the way your body was created to renew, to revive, to restore, to redeem. And when we think about that magnitude of that concept, science and scripture was never meant to be aligned, or never meant to be separate. They were always meant to be aligned and walking in lockstep. And when we start to live our lives that way, suddenly what you've been trying for so long starts to catch a massive level of exponential growth, and your ability to gain momentum on this health journey so that you can have a greater capacity to carry the calling on your life takes off. This was never meant to be something to be optimized. And this is what you mentioned, Ben Greenfield and I. This is, I think, one of the things that we disagreed on the most, because Ben really kind of took off in this biohacking space.
Right.
And I always just felt like it was soulless.
Right.
I'd go to Dave Asprey's biohacking conference, and you see people putting these blue light blockers on and being afraid of the sun and all of these things that you're like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? But yet you can't eat a salad with chicken without asking 45 questions about where it came from. Like, did the chicken have friends?
Right.
Where was the salad dressing made? It's like there's this level of obsession and idolatry over health. Going back to the thing that I very much said is, like, it becomes about this optimization, where we were never meant to be things that were to be optimized. We were always meant to be things that were focused on building capacity to carry the calling that's on our life, even if that calling is to be the best mom or dad in the world, even if the calling is to be the best business owner in the world, even if whatever that is, like, what is the level of excellence that is being drawn out of you? You know what it feels like to be exhausted, burnt out, fatigued, medicated, not motivated to do anything. You know what that feels like. And that is not life and life abundantly. That is what John 10:10 calls the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That is what we are living in. We're walking in a conformed lifestyle, that of what the world tells us to do. Seek more, get more, do more. If more is good, then even more must be better. And we continue to seek, strive, and push instead of allowing ourselves to receive, grow, and multiply, which is ultimately what it is that we do when we come back to that level of alignment and depth.
Yeah, I think that's, you mentioned about the biohacking. I think that's where I might have listened less to Ben, and I don't want to drag Ben, but, the idea of being superhuman. I'm like, I have no desire to be superhuman. I'm still trying to figure out being human. Let me get a handle on being human first, which is hard enough, let alone being superhuman. And then also it's like, for what? Why am I doing this? To be superhuman for what purpose?
I love where you're going with this, because my last talk that I gave at the biohacking conference was how not to become superhuman, but rather more fully human.
Yeah, right.
And that whole experience, that whole existence, that whole thought process is so foreign to that whole community, because everything's been about tracking, biometrics, blood work, supplements, these glasses, this hack, hyperbaric therapy, red light, biocharger, we can keep going on. It's like, my goodness, it has now gotten to the point where I'm not allowed to leave my home until I've done 3 hours of biohacking things. And if I don't jump in a cold plunge and a sauna and put my hands on 3 electrodes every single day, I'm going to die by the age of 60. Like, no, that's crazy talk. That's wild. And yet there's so many people that invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into their health, but yet never feel fully alive. And what is that telling us?
There's so much. I was just thinking that, I just locked on to buying almond butter and what are the, burning points of different kind of oil properties from Ben, that buying the vitamins became a lot. But one of the things that really stood out about your book that I really loved. Number one, I love the layout of it. I'm like, the layout, I don't know who did the layout, but just the way that it kind of reads and feels, and the spots for notes makes it feel as much workbook as it is kind of, knowledge or educational book. And I don't know you, but I really got the feel that when you committed to the scripture part of including that as being not just a side thing, but the thing, that the dam's open, so to speak. Beautiful. That it was like you had this, you're mainlining it on the page, and it felt much, I won't say authentic, but it felt more kind of unfiltered, and like it was serving who you are in a more clear way.
Man, I received that. It makes me emotional just hearing that, because I was challenged by somebody. His name is Michael Koulianos. And he challenged me, and he said, so many people in today's day and age make scripture or the Bible or Jesus a side note in their own agenda, rather than making it the thing.
Right.
And that was my goal and my mission with this, was to say, hey, if we're going to heal God's way, we got to go to his word. And that was the whole premise. And that was the whole thought line behind this. And so I'm glad that it resonated that way, and that it popped for you, because it's the authentic way in which I wrote it, in which I heard it, and the way in which I was able to kind of download it onto a piece of paper.
Well, the one concerning part was that I think I have all 5 imprisoned hearts, because I was going like, yep, that one. Yeah. Oh yeah. That. Okay. Yeah.
That's okay. You and me both. You and me both, brother. It takes one to write one, right?
Yeah. It's like everything there resonated. I'm like, oh boy. Yeah. I'm still dealing with all of those, and maybe at some point, right. I'll be able to kind of figure that out. But I think, it digs into this connecting of the self and identity. And I really like that part too, which is, who am I fundamentally? I've taught classes on identity and social identity and theories of identity, but this starting with identity, right? This commitment to self in terms of defining who I am and what that means. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. You could describe it much more eloquently than I do, but the commitment to that, right? That sense of self and that notion of identity was really, I think, really resonated a lot with me.
I appreciate that. So often we, as in the health space, we think giving somebody a workout plan and a nutrition journal is going to transform their life. But at the end of the day, it's just a substitute for doing the real work. And you can change somebody's body composition, but you still haven't touched their heart. And we know that if we're going to align mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, it has to align first in who God says you are. And when God is able to put his touch on your life, and you kind of start to identify with who God says you are, it frees you from some of those imprisoned hearts. And for all those listening, those imprisoned hearts, there's 5 of them that I've been able to, through a lot of different research, a lot of different conversations with people far smarter than I, really brought them down to 5, which was the performance heart. It's where you feel like you have to perform your way to be worthy. Anything that you do, you have to win at in order to be successful. That if you're not winning, you're not worthy. And it's the performance heart that honestly encapsulated me in a lot of these ways. The second is the pleaser heart. It's like you have to be the one that says yes to everything. If everybody else is happy around you, if everybody else is okay, then life is okay, even though you're not okay. And so the pleasing heart is like that yes man or yes woman. Then there's the protector heart. This is the person who's been hurt before, the person who's been vulnerable, who's exposed themselves, who's put the work in, who's been let down. And now, man, I'm not exposing myself to that again, because, man, when I get vulnerable, when I get open, when I try something new, that means I go through pain, and I'm not going there anymore. And so there's this protection that comes up, and you come off as very hard. You come off as very unopen, unwilling to be uncoachable. Then there's the pessimistic heart. And the pessimistic heart is that of somebody who is always negative, is is always down on themselves. No matter what I try, it's not going to get me to where I want to go because I was never actually called to go there in the first place. I've tried all that. I've done the test before. I've done the diets before. I've done the workouts before. Nothing works. I'm always going to be this way. And again, that becomes a very trying and difficult place to be, which as I think it's exhausting. And then lastly is the perfecter heart, where it's like everything has to be perfect. I'm a perfectionist. If I don't work out 7 days a week, then I can't bear work 6 days a week because I missed a day and I'm a failure. Right. If I can't get my 30 minutes of breath work in middle of the day, then I'm going to do none because it's not going to do me any good. And so there's this perfectionism in where we operate in. And the downside about this is the heart that has us, the heart that's attached to us, the heart that we've agreed with, is ultimately the identity that determines what habits and behaviors and life rhythms we accept in our lives. And so your habits, behaviors, and life rhythms are simply your identity made visible. And you start to observe people long enough and you can start to identify exactly which or multiple of which hearts somebody is imprisoned by. And the imprisonment of those hearts will ultimately cloud the mind. Those people will start to think certain things, like I just said. Mm-hmm. And it's not until you suddenly are able to attach to who does God say you are? Who does God say you are? You are chosen. You are a man maker. You are a leader of leaders. You are a rising tide. You are a catalyst for change. That all of a sudden I go, man, everything that I've been trying to earn, I've already gotten for free. I'm worthy just as I am. I'm loved just as I am. I'm put on this earth to do something great, and I'm in this position to impact others. What a blessing. It renews my mind. So thus I start thinking positively. I start thinking more freely. I start thinking that I'm in the exact place at this right time for this exact moment for a time such as this, which then determines your habits and behaviors and life rhythms. And the two lives that are ultimately shaped out of that are two very different ones.
It's going back to this idea of environment, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, if you did your research, but all 5 of those points are also characteristics of somebody who grew up with family dysfunction.
Yeah.
Right. All of them. And because I grew up in a situation of alcoholism. And, if you look at the characteristics of a person who's an adult who grew up in that kind of situation, all 5 of those are part of a dysfunctional environment that one grew up in, and now as part of that experience, trying to then deal with the legacy of that without actually dealing with the legacy of that.
I love that you use the word legacy because as I wrote the book, going back to the framework again, is we start with who, and then the who leads into the what. So once you know who you are, you know what to do, the habits that you need to operate within. Once you know who you are, you know what to do. God will expose to you how to do it in these different rhythms. And then once you know who you are, what to do, and how to do it, and have done that over time, you get the benefit and the luxury of figuring out why. Right. And I think that's the beautiful part, because the why is the legacy. The why is what you get to break. And so you talk about this is like you grew up in a home of alcoholism. I say that's great. You grew up and you had sexual abuse. That's great. You grew up in a home of poverty and scarcity mindset. That's great. You grew up in the home of riches and wealth and privilege, and that's great. All of these things created certain identities within you that caused you to live in a certain way. But when we come back to the truth of it, you become the chain breaker, because each and every one of us have to realize that we're multipliers. And so we either multiply healthy things or we multiply dysfunctional things. And if we want to multiply healthy things, then it has to come from a healthy identity. And when we know who we are and the habits and behaviors and life rhythms that follow that, we get then to be the person who breaks the chain of alcoholism in our lives. We get to be the person who breaks the chain of sexual abuse in our lives. We get to be the person who breaks the chain of poverty and small-minded thinking in our lives. We get to be the person who breaks the chain of privilege and money wasting and egregious wealth in our lives. We get to be the person who breaks these generational patterns and experience life and life abundantly solely because we started to see ourselves the way God saw us, not the way that the world told us.
Yeah, to get rid of the stigma of it and to live in the opportunity of it, that this is, provides, at least speaking for myself, an opportunity to see the world in a particular kind of way and then make a decision about what I do with that. Yep. And, going back to your point about identity, who I am, what I'm doing, and then why I'm doing it. And I like that because it goes opposite of this idea of start with why. It's like, start with who.
Exactly. It's exactly it. And again, in a lot of my keynotes, I talk about that is Simon Sinek made a career out of this self-improvement platform called the
Golden Circle.
The Golden Circle, which is start with why.
Right.
And I think it works really well in business. And I think here's the funny thing, right? When I start to dive into the psychology of it, why people actually start to buy more from people who start with why, because all of a sudden they saw who they were, because you started with a story. Right. You started with who you had to become in order to create this business or where this business came from. And it's like, oh, I want to become like that. I want to shape myself into somebody different. So you're actually not starting with why, you're starting with who. And when you start with who, it starts to get you to a new place to transform, because I always had to start with the definition of transformation too, because I think a lot of us hear the word transformation. We want to transform, but we actually don't know what it costs or requires. And transformation means leaving what was once behind, meaning it changing in form and function. So you can't act the same way, you can't do the same things, and you can't be the same thing. A butterfly cannot go back to being a caterpillar. It transformed. There is something new. It is a new thing. And so if you want to ultimately go from being a adolescent boy and being treated like an adolescent boy and being exhausted every day when you wake up because you're 33 years old and you're acting like you're 21, and you got fired from your job and you're 25 pounds overweight and you have brain fog every morning you wake up, you're pre-diabetic, your doctor says you need to lose the weight, you just can't do it, you're frustrated. Well, that you can't go out with the boys every night, drinking 7 pints, watching a ball game until 1 a.m., going to bed, waking up at 7 a.m., hitting snooze 5 times, grabbing a Danish on the way out the door, and then sitting at your office all day and expect to find something new. You are needing to transform into someone else that is, hey, I want to be the leader that my household desires. And thus, I'm going to be somebody who goes to bed at a consistent time, wakes up at a consistent time, goes to the gym, has a nourishing breakfast, is attentive and alert all day long, is leading a division, is getting promoted in his job, comes home at night, has overflow of energy for his wife and kids, and is able to show what being a man looks like, which is being strong but humble, which is being powerful but gentle, is the dichotomy, and having the full array of emotional experience so that you can ultimately meet people where they are and be able to walk in that. That requires you knowing exactly who God made you to be, so you become convicted on the what and the how, and over the course of time you realize the greatness that life actually can bring when you walk in that fully.
Well, I think it's a great place to wrap things up, Justin. Thank you so much for sharing this. I enjoyed the book, and it comes out August 11th, correct?
August 11th, holyhealthbook.com is where you can grab it.
And we'll put all those links, including links for your other work, in the show notes so people can make sure to know where it's at. Thank you so much.
So good to be here. I appreciate you.
I want to thank Justin Roethlingshoefer for joining me to talk about hockey, human performance, spirituality, and the Tragically Hip. You can find out more about his work, his book, Holy Health, which comes out August 11th, and his company in the links in the show notes. As always, you can share feedback on this episode or any episode at feedback@experiencexdesign.com. You can also share your feedback over on LinkedIn at the Experience by Design podcast page. If you're not a member of that, make sure you subscribe to that page and be involved in all of the community discussion about this episode and all other episodes. If you want to subscribe to stay on top of all the news regarding the Unwow, you can head over to theunwow.com and provide your email. I'll make sure to keep you in the loop on all the happenings related to the Unwow. And there's going to be a lot of happenings coming up, so you're going to want to be on top of all of that exciting news. And as you get ready to plan your next corporate event or other event for the remaining year, gosh, it's hard to believe, or the upcoming year in 2027, and you need a speaker with humor, insight, charisma, and charm, make sure you consider me, Gary David. You know me from the podcast, but now you can know me in person as well. You can check out my speaking profile at garyconnects.com. And you can connect with me at gary@garyconnects.com or DM me through LinkedIn. And with that, as always, be safe, be kind, be well, and be here for the next experience by design. Bye.